Leonardo da Vinci, the illegitimate son who became immortal. Hello, my friends. Today, I want to tell you the incredible story of Leonardo da Vinci, the ultimate Renaissance genius, whose name means excellence even today. This is not just a history lesson, it's a journey into the mind of someone who could paint masterpieces, invent flying machines, design weapons, and study human anatomy all at the same time. Filled with creativity, struggle, rivalry, and eternal beauty, Leonardo da Vinci was the most versatile genius who ever lived, and his life is like an epic adventure story. So sit back, relax, and enjoy this amazing story, perfect for your English practice, and I promise you will love every moment of it. Chapter 1: The Bastard Child of Vinci. Over 570 years ago, on April 15, 1452, in a small village in the hills of Tuscany, Italy, a baby boy was born in scandal. This baby was illegitimate, born outside of marriage to a wealthy notary and a peasant girl. The baby's name was Leonardo, which means brave lion, and he came from the town of Vinci, so he became known as Leonardo da Vinci, Leonardo from Vinci. But this illegitimate child would grow up to create some of the most famous artworks in human history and become a symbol of human genius itself. Leonardo's father was Ser Piero da Vinci, a successful notary, which means he was a legal professional who prepared documents and contracts. Ser Piero came from a respected family that had produced notaries for generations. He had money, status, and a good reputation. But Leonardo's mother was Caterina, a young peasant woman, probably a servant or farm worker. In Renaissance Italy, being illegitimate was a serious problem. It meant you had no legal rights, you couldn't inherit property, you couldn't follow your father's profession, and society looked down on you. Leonardo would carry this shame his entire life. He was never fully accepted by his father's family, and he grew up feeling like an outsider. Ser Piero did not marry Caterina. Instead, shortly after Leonardo was born, Ser Piero married a woman from a respectable family, someone who matched his social status. Caterina was married off to a local farmer. Leonardo spent his first few years with his mother in the countryside, but eventually his father took him to live in the family home in Vinci. Imagine how confusing this must have been for young Leonardo. His mother disappeared from his life, and he went to live with his father's family. But even there, he didn't truly belong. His father had a new wife who would have her own children. Leonardo was tolerated but not fully embraced. He was the reminder of his father's mistake. But Leonardo's illegitimate status had one unexpected advantage. Because he couldn't become a notary like his father, because he couldn't follow traditional career paths, Leonardo was free to explore his own interests and talents. While other boys from wealthy families were forced to study Latin and law, Leonardo was allowed to wander, observe, and dream. Leonardo grew up in the beautiful Tuscan countryside, surrounded by rolling hills, olive groves, vineyards, and farms. His days were spent exploring nature, watching birds, studying flowers, examining insects, and observing how water swirled in streams. This connection with nature would influence everything Leonardo created for the rest of his life. From a very young age, Leonardo showed extraordinary talent for drawing. His grandfather, who helped raise him, noticed that Leonardo could draw anything he saw with incredible accuracy. Leonardo didn't just copy what he saw, he understood it. He could look at a bird and draw not just its shape, but the way its wings moved, the way light reflected off its feathers. Leonardo was also left-handed, in a time when being left-handed was considered suspicious and even evil. Teachers tried to force left-handed children to write with their right hand, but Leonardo refused. he developed his own unique way of writing. He wrote backwards from right to left in mirror writing. You could only read Leonardo's writing if you held it up to a mirror. Some historians think Leonardo wrote backwards to keep his ideas secret. Others think he simply found it more natural and comfortable. Whatever the reason, Leonardo's mirror writing became one of his trademarks. It made his notebooks mysterious and added to his reputation as someone extraordinary. But Leonardo had another secret weapon: insatiable curiosity. Leonardo wanted to know everything. How do birds fly? Why is the sky blue? How do mussels work? What makes water swirl? While other children accepted the world as it was, Leonardo questioned everything he saw. Nothing was too small or too ordinary to capture his attention. When Leonardo was about 14 years old, his father recognized his son's artistic talent. Ser Piero decided to apprentice Leonardo to one of the best artists in Florence, a master painter and sculptor named Andrea del Verrocchio. Florence was the center of art and culture in Italy, and Verrocchio's workshop was one of the most prestigious. Leonardo left his small village and moved to the big, exciting city of Florence. Imagine this teenage boy arriving in a city full of artists, merchants, wealthy patrons, and magnificent buildings. Florence was where the Renaissance was happening, where new ideas about art, science, and human potential were exploding. At Verrocchio's workshop, Leonardo learned everything about being an artist. He learned how to grind pigments to make paint, how to prepare wooden panels and canvases, how to mix colors, how to use perspective to create depth. He learned sculpture, metalwork, and engineering. Leonardo absorbed knowledge like a sponge. But Leonardo was not a normal apprentice. He didn't just learn the techniques, he wanted to understand the principles behind them. When painting a human figure, Leonardo didn't just copy what he saw, he studied anatomy. He wanted to know what was underneath the skin, the muscles, the bones, the tendons. Leonardo's talent quickly became obvious. He was better than the other apprentices, and soon he was better than many professional artists. There's a famous story that when Leonardo was still a student, Verrocchio asked him to paint an angel in one of his paintings. Leonardo's angel was so beautiful, so lifelike, and so perfect that Verrocchio was amazed. Some say Verrocchio never painted again because he realized his student had surpassed him. By the time Leonardo was 20 years old, he had completed his apprenticeship and was accepted into the Painters Guild. This meant he was now a professional artist who could take his own commissions. But Leonardo didn't rush to start his career. He continued to study, to experiment, and to explore. What made Leonardo different from other artists was his refusal to specialize. Most artists focused on painting or sculpture. Leonardo wanted to master everything: art, science, engineering, anatomy, botany, mathematics, music, architecture. Nothing was outside his interest. Leonardo's childhood as an illegitimate outsider had shaped him profoundly. He learned to rely on his own observations rather than accepting what others told him. He developed an independent mind that questioned everything, and he carried a deep desire to prove his worth, to show the world that despite his shameful birth, he was capable of greatness. And so, the story of Leonardo's rise to become the ultimate Renaissance man begins. This illegitimate child who wasn't allowed to follow traditional paths would create his own path, and in doing so would change art and science forever. Chapter 2. The Young Master in Florence. Leonardo da Vinci was now a professional artist living in Florence, the most artistically vibrant city in the world. But becoming a master was just the beginning. This chapter is about Leonardo's early career, his first masterpieces, his struggles to finish projects, and the development of his unique genius that would revolutionize art forever. In the 1470s, Florence was ruled by the Medici family, particularly Lorenzo de' Medici, known as Lorenzo the Magnificent. The Medicis were wealthy bankers who used their fortune to support artists, sculptors, architects, and scholars. They made Florence the cultural capital of Europe. Leonardo hoped to gain the attention of the Medici family. Getting a commission from them would establish his reputation and bring him wealth and respect. But Lorenzo de' Medici seemed more interested in other artists, particularly a young sculptor named Michelangelo. This rejection hurt Leonardo and planted the seeds of a rivalry that would last for decades. Instead of waiting for the perfect patron, Leonardo began taking commissions from churches, monasteries, and private citizens. His first major commission came in 1478 to paint an altarpiece for the chapel of San Bernardo in the Palazzo Vecchio, but Leonardo never finished it. This would become a pattern throughout his life. Leonardo would start projects with enthusiasm, but lose interest before completing them. Why did Leonardo abandon so many projects? The answer reveals something important about his personality. Leonardo was a perfectionist. He had such high standards that many of his works never satisfied him. He would rather abandon a painting than finish it imperfectly. Leonardo was also easily distracted. When he started thinking about a new idea or problem, he couldn't resist exploring it, even if it meant abandoning current projects. In 1481, Leonardo received an important commission from the monastery of San Donato to paint an Adoration of the Magi. This religious painting was supposed to show the three wise men visiting baby Jesus. Leonardo approached the project with incredible ambition. Instead of creating a simple, traditional composition, he designed a complex, dynamic scene with dozens of figures, dramatic gestures, and revolutionary techniques. Leonardo made detailed sketches and studies. He experimented with new ways of creating depth and movement. He worked on the underdrawing using a brown monochrome technique that showed his incredible understanding of light and shadow. But after working on the painting for several months, Leonardo abandoned it when he left Florence. The unfinished Adoration of the Magi remained in the monastery. Even unfinished, this painting showed Leonardo's genius. It demonstrated his ability to create psychological drama, to capture human emotion, and to compose complex scenes that felt alive and real. Art historians today study the Adoration of the Magi as one of the most important unfinished works in art history. During these years in Florence, Leonardo was conducting scientific experiments. He dissected animals to study their anatomy. He observed birds in flight and made detailed drawings of their wing movements. He studied water and how it flowed around obstacles. Leonardo's notebooks from this period are filled with sketches, observations, and questions about everything he saw. But Leonardo had another secret that complicated his life. In 1476, Leonardo and several other young men were anonymously accused of sodomy, which was illegal in Florence. The charges were eventually dropped, but the scandal damaged Leonardo's reputation. Some historians believe this experience made Leonardo more secretive and distrustful. By 1482, Leonardo was 30 years old and feeling frustrated in Florence. He hadn't gotten the recognition he deserved. The Medici family didn't appreciate his genius, and he had a reputation for not finishing projects. Leonardo decided he needed a fresh start. He needed to go somewhere he could reinvent himself. Leonardo heard that Ludovico Sforza, the Duke of Milan, was looking for artists and engineers to work at his court. Milan was a wealthy, powerful city in northern Italy, and Ludovico was an ambitious ruler who wanted to make his court as magnificent as Florence. Leonardo saw an opportunity. Leonardo wrote a remarkable letter to Ludovico, offering his services. But in this letter, Leonardo barely mentioned his artistic abilities. Instead, he presented himself primarily as an engineer. Leonardo claimed he could design portable bridges, siege weapons, armored vehicles, and new types of cannons. Only at the end of the letter did Leonardo mention that he could also paint and sculpt. This letter reveals Leonardo's strategy. He knew that being a painter was not enough to impress a powerful duke, but claiming to be an engineer, someone who could help win wars, that would get attention. Leonardo was reinventing himself as more than an artist. He was presenting himself as a universal genius. Ludovico Sforza was impressed and invited Leonardo to Milan. Leonardo packed his belongings and left Florence behind. He was leaving unfinished paintings, disappointed patrons, and a city that didn't fully appreciate him, but he was heading toward new opportunities. In Milan, Leonardo's life changed dramatically. Ludovico gave him a workshop, a salary, and freedom to explore his interests. Leonardo didn't just work as a court painter. He designed weapons, organized festivals, created stage productions, studied anatomy, and conducted scientific experiments. One of Leonardo's first major projects in Milan was to create a massive bronze statue of a horse to honor Ludovico's father. Leonardo designed a horse that would be over 20 feet tall, the largest bronze statue ever attempted. He made detailed studies of horses, observing them from every angle, understanding their anatomy and movement. Leonardo worked on this project for years, making clay models, calculating the engineering challenges of casting such a massive bronze sculpture. But the project faced constant delays. There wasn't enough bronze, political situations changed, and Leonardo kept revising his designs. The horse was never cast. The clay model eventually stood in front of the castle, but was destroyed years later when French soldiers used it for target practice. But Leonardo's failure with the horse didn't stop him in Milan. He created some of his greatest works during the 1490s. Leonardo painted The Lady with an Ermine, a portrait so lifelike that people said you could see the subject breathing. He painted The Musician and began work on The Last Supper. The Last Supper, painted on the wall of a monastery dining hall, would become one of the most famous paintings in the world. Leonardo spent 3 years working on this massive mural. He tried a new experimental technique, mixing oil paint with tempera, hoping to create richer colors and more subtle effects. Leonardo's approach to The Last Supper was revolutionary. He captured the exact moment when Jesus tells his disciples that one of them will betray him. Each disciple reacts differently, with shock, anger, confusion, and denial. Leonardo painted human psychology, creating a dramatic narrative frozen in time. But Leonardo's experimental technique was a disaster. Within years, the paint began to peel and flake. The painting started deteriorating almost immediately. Despite this technical failure, The Last Supper became legendary for its composition, its emotional power, and its revolutionary approach to storytelling through art. Leonardo's years in Milan were productive and relatively happy. He had the support of a wealthy patron, the freedom to pursue multiple interests, and the respect of the court. But this golden period wouldn't last forever. Political storms were gathering that would force Leonardo to flee Milan and begin wandering from city to city, searching for stability. What we learn from this chapter is that Leonardo was already showing the patterns that would define his life: brilliant, ambitious, curious, and unable to focus on one thing or to finish what he started. But even his unfinished works revealed a mind that operated on a completely different level from other artists. Chapter 3: The Wandering Genius. Leonardo da Vinci had found success in Milan, but his comfortable life was about to shatter. This chapter is about Leonardo's years of wandering when political chaos forced him to travel from city to city, when he created his most famous painting, and when his rivalry with a younger artist became one of the greatest conflicts in art history. In 1499, disaster struck Milan. The French army invaded and conquered the city. Ludovico Sforza, Leonardo's patron, was captured and imprisoned. Leonardo suddenly found himself without protection, without income, and in a dangerous war zone. He had to flee. Leonardo was now 47 years old and starting over again. He left Milan with his closest companion, a young man named Salai, who had been his assistant and model for years. Leonardo also traveled with another student, Luca Pacioli, a mathematician. Leonardo had nowhere to go and no clear plan. For the next few years, Leonardo wandered through Italy. He went to Mantua, where he drew a portrait of Isabella d'Este, a powerful noblewoman who desperately wanted Leonardo to paint her, but Leonardo never completed the painting. He went to Venice, where he advised the city on how to defend against Turkish naval attacks. Then he returned to Florence, the city he had left nearly 20 years before. Florence had changed in Leonardo's absence. A new generation of artists had emerged, and the most famous among them was Michelangelo Buonarroti. Michelangelo was 23 years younger than Leonardo, and his style was completely different. While Leonardo painted with soft, subtle shadows and mysterious smiles, Michelangelo created powerful, muscular figures with dramatic intensity. The rivalry between Leonardo and Michelangelo was not just about different artistic styles, it was personal. Michelangelo had grown up in Florence and had been supported by the Medici family, the same family that had ignored Leonardo. Michelangelo was hot-tempered, passionate, and deeply religious. Leonardo was cool, analytical, and scientific. There's a famous story of these two masters meeting on a street in Florence. Some men were arguing about a passage from Dante's Divine Comedy and asked Leonardo to explain it. Leonardo suggested they ask Michelangelo, who was passing by. Michelangelo thought Leonardo was mocking him and snapped angrily, "Explain it yourself, you who designed a bronze horse and couldn't cast it and abandoned it in shame." Michelangelo was referring to Leonardo's failed horse statue in Milan. Leonardo was humiliated. He walked away without responding, but the insult wounded him deeply. The rivalry between these two giants of Renaissance art was bitter and public. Florence loved the drama of having both masters in the city at the same time. In 1503, the government of Florence decided to commission both Leonardo and Michelangelo to paint huge battle scenes on opposite walls of the council hall. This would be the ultimate artistic showdown. Leonardo chose to paint the Battle of Anghiari, a chaotic, violent cavalry battle. Michelangelo chose to paint the Battle of Cascina, showing soldiers surprised while bathing. Both artists created preparatory drawings that were considered masterpieces. Leonardo's drawing showed horses and men twisted in furious combat, with expressions of rage and fear. Michelangelo's drawing showed the male body in every possible dynamic pose, demonstrating his supreme skill in anatomy. Artists from all over Italy came to see these drawings and learn from them. The two masters were creating something extraordinary, but neither painting was ever completed. Leonardo began painting his battle scene on the wall, but again his experimental technique failed. The paint wouldn't dry properly and began to run. Leonardo abandoned the project in frustration. Michelangelo was called to Rome by the Pope and never started painting his wall. The great artistic confrontation ended with both works unfinished, but during this competitive period, Leonardo created something that would make him immortal: the Mona Lisa, the most famous painting in the world. Leonardo began painting the Mona Lisa around 1503. The painting shows a woman with a mysterious smile sitting in front of a dream-like landscape. The subject was probably Lisa Gherardini, the wife of a wealthy Florentine merchant, but Leonardo transformed her into something universal, something that transcends any individual identity. What makes the Mona Lisa so special? Leonardo used a technique called sfumato, which means smoky or vanished. He painted with such subtle gradations of light and shadow that there are no harsh lines. Everything blends softly, creating an almost magical effect. The woman's smile appears and disappears depending on how you look at it. She seems alive, aware, conscious. Leonardo became obsessed with the Mona Lisa. He carried the painting with him everywhere he went, constantly making tiny adjustments and refinements. He never delivered the painting to whoever commissioned it. Instead, he kept it, claiming it wasn't finished yet. Leonardo worked on the Mona Lisa for years, possibly for the rest of his life. But Leonardo needed money. He couldn't survive on the Mona Lisa alone. In 1506, Leonardo was invited back to Milan, which was now controlled by the French. The French governor, Charles d'Amboise, greatly admired Leonardo and treated him with respect and generosity. Leonardo returned to Milan and spent several productive years there. During this period, Leonardo continued his scientific investigations. He dissected over 30 human corpses to study anatomy, something that was difficult and often illegal. Leonardo made the most detailed and accurate anatomical drawings that had ever been created. He discovered things about the human body that wouldn't be confirmed by medical science for centuries. Leonardo studied the heart and came remarkably close to understanding how blood circulates. He drew the development of a baby in the womb. He examined muscles, tendons, and bones. He investigated the eye and tried to understand how vision works. Leonardo's anatomical notebooks are considered one of the supreme achievements of Renaissance science. But Leonardo was restless again. By 1513, he was 61 years old, still without a permanent home, still searching for a patron who would truly appreciate his genius. Leonardo heard that the new Pope, Leo X, was gathering artists and scholars in Rome. Leonardo decided to go there, hoping for important commissions. In Rome, Leonardo was disappointed. Michelangelo had already completed the ceiling of the Sistine Chapel, a monumental achievement that had made him the most celebrated artist in Italy. A younger artist named Raphael was painting the Pope's apartments and receiving all the attention. Leonardo felt old, overshadowed, and unappreciated. Leonardo spent his time in Rome conducting experiments with mirrors and lenses, trying to discover the secrets of light. He made flying machines that didn't fly. He studied mathematics and geometry, but he received no major commissions. The Pope even said, according to a report, "Alas, this man will never accomplish anything because he thinks about the end before the beginning." Leonardo's perfectionism and his habit of leaving projects unfinished had finally caught up with him. His reputation was that he was brilliant but unreliable. People admired his genius but hesitated to hire him. Leonardo faced the bitter reality that younger artists were surpassing him in fame and success. Then, in 1516, something unexpected happened. Leonardo received an invitation that would give him dignity and security in his final years. King Francis I of France invited Leonardo to come live in France. The young king, who was only 22 years old, was a passionate admirer of Leonardo's work. He offered Leonardo a title, Royal Painter, Engineer, and Architect, along with a generous pension and a beautiful manor house. Leonardo accepted immediately. He packed his belongings, including the Mona Lisa and his notebooks, and traveled across the Alps to France. Finally, after years of wandering, Leonardo had found a patron who appreciated him not for what he could produce, but for who he was. Chapter 4. The Final Kingdom. Leonardo da Vinci was now an old man of 64, traveling to a foreign country to live out his final years. But these last years in France were not a sad ending. They were a time of reflection, honor, and recognition. This chapter is about Leonardo's relationship with the young king who adored him, the peaceful end of a restless life, and the eternal mystery of what Leonardo truly achieved. King Francis I of France was everything Leonardo had hoped for in a patron. The young king was intelligent, curious, cultured, and generous. He didn't pressure Leonardo to produce paintings or complete projects. Instead, he valued Leonardo's conversation, his wisdom, and his ideas. Francis treated Leonardo not as a servant, but as a respected elder. Leonardo settled in the manor house of Clos-Lucé in the Loire Valley, near the king's own castle of Amboise. The house was comfortable, with enough space for Leonardo, his assistants, and his countless notebooks and drawings. A secret underground passage connected Leonardo's house to the king's castle, so Francis could visit Leonardo easily. According to legend, King Francis visited Leonardo almost daily. They would walk through the gardens and talk for hours about art, science, philosophy, war, architecture, and the nature of reality. Francis asked questions, and Leonardo shared his knowledge he had accumulated for a lifetime of observation and thought. For Leonardo, these conversations must have been deeply satisfying. All his life he had been misunderstood, criticized for not finishing paintings, judged for being more interested in science than art. But Francis understood that Leonardo's genius couldn't be reduced to completed artworks. Leonardo's true masterpiece was his mind itself. Leonardo continued working on his notebooks during these final years. His handwriting became shakier, his mirror script less precise, but his curiosity never dimmed. He made drawings of apocalyptic deluges, showing water destroying entire civilizations. These dark visions suggest that Leonardo was thinking about endings, about the inevitable power of nature over human achievements. Leonardo also worked on organizing his notebooks, trying to transform his lifetime of scattered observations into coherent treatises on painting, anatomy, water mechanics, and other subjects. He dreamed of publishing books that would share his discoveries with the world, but this project was too vast. Leonardo's notebooks were too numerous, too disorganized, and his time was running out. By 1517, Leonardo's health was declining. A stroke paralyzed his right hand, but since Leonardo was left-handed, he could still write and draw to some extent. However, his days of painting were over. The fine, precise work required for his subtle techniques was beyond his physical capabilities. Despite his declining health, Leonardo continued to advise King Francis on architectural projects and engineering problems. Francis was building new palaces and fortifications, and he valued Leonardo's expertise. Leonardo designed a spectacular palace for the king at Romorantin with elaborate water systems, though, like so many of Leonardo's projects, it was never built. Leonardo also organized festivals and pageants for the court, combining his talents in art, engineering, and theatrical design. These events delighted the French nobility and showed that even in old age, Leonardo could create beauty and wonder. During these years, Leonardo's household included his faithful companion, Salai, and another devoted pupil, Francesco Melzi. Melzi was a young nobleman who had studied with Leonardo for years and had become like a son to him. Melzi would later inherit all of Leonardo's notebooks and drawings, a precious legacy that Melzi protected carefully. On April 23, 1519, Leonardo da Vinci made his will. He left money to servants and relatives. He gave Salai property he owned in Milan, but most importantly, he left all his notebooks, drawings, and instruments to Francesco Melzi. Leonardo understood that his greatest legacy was not his paintings, but the accumulated knowledge in his notebooks. According to a romantic story that may or may not be true, Leonardo died in the arms of King Francis I on May 2, 1519. The story claims that Francis was visiting Leonardo when the old master passed away, and that Leonardo died apologizing for not accomplishing more, offending God and mankind by not working on his art as he should have. Whether this story is true or not, it captures something real about Leonardo. Even at the end of his life, Leonardo felt he had not done enough, had not finished enough, had not solved all the mysteries he wanted to understand. Leonardo's ambitions were so vast that even his incredible achievements seemed insufficient to him. Leonardo was buried in the Church of Saint Florentin in Amboise, but during the French Revolution, centuries later, the church was destroyed and Leonardo's grave was lost. Today, no one knows exactly where Leonardo da Vinci's bones rest. This seems somehow fitting for a man who spent his life moving from place to place, never quite settling, never quite finished. After Leonardo's death, his legacy faced an uncertain future. Most of his paintings were scattered in private collections, many were unfinished or deteriorating. His notebooks were in Francesco Melzi's possession, but Melzi didn't know what to do with them. There were thousands of pages in mirror writing covering countless subjects. After Melzi died, Leonardo's notebooks were divided among Melzi's heirs and gradually dispersed. Some were lost, some were damaged, some were sold to collectors. It would take centuries before scholars could gather Leonardo's scattered notebooks, study them systematically, and understand the true scope of his genius. But slowly, Leonardo's reputation grew. The Mona Lisa became increasingly famous, drawing visitors who wanted to see the mysterious woman with the impossible smile. The Last Supper, despite its deteriorated condition, was recognized as one of the greatest narrative paintings ever created. In the 19th and 20th centuries, as Leonardo's notebooks were collected, translated, and published, the world discovered that Leonardo had anticipated countless modern inventions. He had designed helicopters, tanks, submarines, parachutes, and flying machines. He had studied aerodynamics, anatomy, botany, geology, hydraulics, and optics. Leonardo had studied the nature of light, optics, astronomy, and mathematics. He had thought about everything: how fossils got onto mountains, why the moon shines, why plants grow, why rivers meander, how muscles move. Leonardo's curiosity was literally universal. Today, Leonardo da Vinci is considered the ultimate Renaissance man, the perfect example of human potential, the symbol of creativity, curiosity, and genius. His name means excellence, brilliance, the highest level of human achievement. When we say someone is a Leonardo, we mean they are exceptionally talented in multiple fields. But what did Leonardo himself achieve? This is the eternal question. Leonardo completed only about 15 paintings during his entire life. Many of his engineering designs were impossible to build with Renaissance technology. His scientific discoveries remained hidden in notebooks for centuries. Leonardo never published a single book, never built a working flying machine, never finished the horse statue. And yet, Leonardo's influence is immeasurable. Every artist after him was influenced by his techniques, his understanding of light and shadow, his ability to capture human psychology. The scientific method, his insistence on observation over authority, his detailed anatomical studies, all of these shaped how we understand the world. Leonardo showed humanity that we don't have to choose between art and science, between beauty and truth, between emotion and reason. Leonardo proved that the highest form of human achievement is to embrace everything, to study nature with scientific precision, and to express what we learn with artistic beauty. Leonardo's life teaches us that success isn't just about finishing projects or producing tangible results. Sometimes the journey of exploration itself is the achievement. Leonardo's endless curiosity, his refusal to accept easy answers, his willingness to question everything, these qualities are his true legacy.
Leonardo also teaches us that being different, being an outsider, can be a source of strength. Leonardo's illegitimate birth freed him from traditional expectations. His inability to receive classical education made him rely on direct observation. His wandering from city to city exposed him to different ideas and cultures. So, my friends, let Leonardo da Vinci's story inspire you to embrace your curiosity, to question everything, to refuse to limit yourself to one narrow path. Leonardo reminds us that the greatest minds are those that remain open, that continue learning, that never stop asking why. Leonardo's life may have been filled with unfinished projects, but his legacy is complete. He showed us that one person, one mind, can explore the entire universe, from the mechanics of the human heart to the flight of birds, from the smile on a woman's face to the flow of rivers through valleys. Be like Leonardo, curious, fearless, endlessly fascinated by everything around you. You don't need to be perfect. You don't need to finish everything you start. What matters is that you never stop learning, never stop observing, never stop trying to understand the beautiful, mysterious world we live in. Leonardo proved that one lifetime is both too short to learn everything and more than enough to change everything. He looked at the world with fresh eyes and saw miracles in ordinary things. He picked up a brush and created immortality. What did you think of this incredible journey? Isn't Leonardo's story one of the most inspiring stories in history? Let his life remind you that no matter what obstacles you face, no matter how impossible your dreams seem, you have the power to create, to discover, to become immortal through your work.